If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 1?
To make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand or dial star. Public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Any discussion or a motion?
I move to approve.
Second.
I think that was Jennifer making the motion and Marcia seconding. Please call the roll. If there's no further discussion, please call the roll.
Okay. Trustee Falguth.
Yes.
Joshi.
I abstain since I was not present at the meeting.
Okay. Moreau.
Yes.
Petty.
Yes.
And Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries with 4 affirmative votes and 1 abstention. Next item on our agenda is public comments, which is an opportunity for a member of the public to address the board on any item that is not on our library board agenda today. Francesca, would you check and see if there are any public comments today?
Yes, and we do encourage members of the public to join our meeting via Zoom. You will be connected live in real time to the meeting. To raise your hand using Zoom, please raise your Zoom hand. If you're connected by phone, dial star 9. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Very good, thank you. The next section of our agenda is our public appearance section, and it includes items 2 through 7. And the first item among those is item number 2, which is to receive a report from the Ad Hoc Library Director Recruitment Committee and provide direction regarding the Library Director recruitment and selection process. And I thought it would be appropriate, actually, before we get into the details of recruiting for a new director, to say a few words about our current director, Inga Waite. I think I speak for the entire board, but I know I speak for myself when I say that Inga has just done an outstanding job as our library director over the last 6 years, almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years in March, if I recall correctly. I think it was March 2016 she became our director, and of course worked for the library many years before that as well. And I think she's done a great job in so many different ways, but I particularly wanted to highlight what I thought was her indispensable service to the library over the last 2 years while we've been dealing with the pandemic. It's just been a very traumatic time for the city and certainly for the library, with having to close the library, having to lay off the vast majority of the staff, gradually bringing back some services, doing a great job starting the sidewalk service and some virtual programming. And then over time, we've been gradually reopening and bringing back a few of the former staff. We're still much lower staff than we had been, with a much lower budget. But throughout all of this, which I know is traumatic for everyone, including Inga, she has always had a very constructive and positive and upbeat attitude that I think was so important for moving the library through all these critical phases we've been through. And I just want to thank her so much for all she's done the entire time, but particularly these last 2 years. And I also wanted to thank her for giving us very graciously 4 to 5 months, I guess it is, advance notice of her retirement. We will be discussing the process for finding a new director shortly, but with any luck, we'll be able to complete that process and hire a new director fairly close to the time of her retirement. And if she'd waited and just gave us 2 weeks or a month or whatever, that would have been clearly impossible. So whether we achieve that or not, it's my goal that we'll try to come close to that. And in any case, before we got into the details, I just wanted to thank and commend Inga so much for all she's done. And I'll also invite any other members of the trustees that wanted to make introductory comments to join in, or we can just leave it at that, whatever you like. Anybody else want to say anything before we get into the details of this item?
Ditto.
Okay. Ornette, did you want to say
a few words? Thank you, Jim, and I appreciate you letting me just say that we've been so lucky to have Inga on the team, and I know your relationship with Inga as members of the Library Board of Trustees is different than mine, but she's just been a pleasure to work with. And I don't know if any of you, or I'm the only one who has Inga on speed dial on my phone, which I'm looking at right now. So It tells you how often we work together collaboratively and collectively. And I just don't have enough great things, but the time to do a roast of Inga Waite isn't now. I know we'll have that later. So look forward to sharing more stories about Inga's great service to the city of Monterey here shortly. But it will be a loss, and looking forward to working with you and the team on recruitment topic for sure today.
Very good. Thank you, Nat. Any other, Bob, did you like to make a comment as well?
Yeah, as I told Inga when we spoke the day she dropped the news in our laps, as one who also retired earlier than at the normal retirement age, I strongly recommend it. And it doesn't surprise me that Inga has made this choice, and I think it's an excellent one for her, at least based on my own experience. What I'm wondering now is, since she's likely to leave the county and start living up in Mariposa, do we give her a snow shovel or an axe to chop wood for a fireplace as a going away present that would be appropriate with rural life that is going to be in her future? We can think about that later, but anyhow, not just thank you for what you've done, but all kinds of good luck and best wishes for what you're going to be starting in, 6 months from now.
Very good. Thank you, Bob. Very good comments as well. And Inga, I asked Inga if she wanted to say a few words, and she thought that was better for later, but I'll give her another opportunity. Would you like to say a few words?
I'll just say thank you so much for the well wishes and for all the positive comments. And I'm really excited to see, the recruitment go forward and to have a great new library director at the Monterey Public Library soon. So thank you all.
Okay, very good. Very good. Well, with that, let's move on to the actual item number 2 at hand, which is the report on the recruitment and selection process. And I won't go through all of the report, but I did want to highlight a few things on it. One, I've appointed Marcia, Trustee Morrow, and myself to an ad hoc committee to coordinate with the city manager's office and the human resources department on the recruitment process. And we've actually already done quite a bit of work, as you can see from some of the documents that are in the packet, as well as some that we emailed to you yesterday. And we'll talk about those a little bit more later. But I did want to mention a couple of things. One is that we are recommending that that the city hire a executive recruiter, sometimes referred to as a headhunter, to help in this process. And the city manager's office has been extremely cooperative with that, and in fact have included in a report that will be going to the city council on March 1, a recommendation for a $30,000 appropriation to the library budget, which is an approximation of what the cost might be for to hire an executive recruitment firm to help with this process. And so I wanted to thank them for that. And also Nat is going to be the liaison to the board and with the human resources department, as well as the city manager's office. And he has also been very cooperative in helping us with some of the documents that we put together in, I think, actually a record short amount of time, given the complexity of some of the documents that we've been working on. So I wanted to thank Nat as well. And one item in particular that I did want to share with the board, and then I'll ask both, I'll actually ask Marcia, Inga, and Nat if they have any additional comments they'd like to make. But as I mentioned before, on the part of the report that deals with hiring an executive recruitment firm, we have prepared a draft letter to send out to potential executive recruiters, as well as put together a list of executive recruiters and and a revised class specification for the library director position. And we just actually completed that work yesterday. And so we did email that to the other three trustees, and that's a public document, of course. But actually just this morning, we came up with an additional revision that we wanted to make to the letter to the headhunters. And so let me see how I can do with doing a share screen here with you to show you the change that we're going to suggest to that one document. So bear with me just a moment here. Yes, on page 2 of that document that we emailed to you, and again, this would be the letter that we would send to the to a list of 20 executive recruitment firms that we have identified. In discussions this morning, Nat actually suggested, and we thought it was a great suggestion, that we include something related to diversity and inclusion in this letter. And so I hope you can see on the shared screen here at the top of the second page, we've suggested adding, as well as your proposed strategy for seeking qualified and diverse candidates. And then the second change is later on in that paragraph, where we would be asking them to describe the qualifications of the staff members intended to work on our recruitment project, including their specific experience in conducting library director recruitments. And we're going to add in an inclusive process. So we thought those two changes would help signal to the potential recruiters that that's a priority to us to give attention to those sorts of issues. So with that, those were the main things that I wanted to highlight. So let me ask Marcia and then Inga and then Nat if they have additional overview comments they'd like to provide.
Yes, I just wanted to say it's a good thing we're all retired, and Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays don't mean anything to us, because this was a hardworking and long hour Saturday, Sunday, and Monday for all of us to get this stuff done in time. I see the urgency of moving it forward and not, letting it drag on, so that we can. The proposal in this letter, it says that the search firms need to respond by March 14th. Then we have to identify the search firm. Then they go out to actually just start doing their work. And so we're doing the best we can to get a jump on this by moving it forward as fast as we can. And it's going to be tight to get it done before June, but I think that we have a chance if we can continue to make progress on it the way we are. But also, at the end of the report that we made today, there were three.
Oh, yes, thank you.
There were three points that maybe you want to bring out, Jim. One being that we're going to cancel the April performance evaluation, those things. Yeah, so I'll turn it back to you.
Actually, thank you. I had meant to highlight that and I forgot. So thank you very much for reminding me. Yes, the three items on the, I guess it's the third page of the report. I don't have the packet page handy, but it's at the packet page.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was.
Yes, Jim. 10.
On packet page 10. Thank you very much. Highlighted three issues that in particular we might want to chat about today. There may be other issues as well. One is that we had planned on having an update performance evaluation with Director Waite in April of 2022. And we thought under the circumstances it might be appropriate to cancel that, particularly because we may need other closed sessions to interview finalists and decide on candidates and that sort of thing. And the second one was, and again, I think it's too early to deal with this issue, but if we're not able to appoint and have a new director available by July, we'll probably need to appoint an interim or an acting library director. So that's just something to be aware of, but I think it's probably premature to talk about that at this point because we're not sure of the time frame that might be involved. And then thirdly, we have proposed in the process that we're doing, and the city manager's office strongly recommends it as well, that we continue to have the library director oversee the museums division. We had kicked around the idea that maybe we would stop that until we got a new director, and the new director was in the position for a while. But we thought it actually made sense to just continue it. We think it's been successful, that it's in the city's best interest to, have close coordination and synergy between the library and the museums division. And we, as indicated in this item, I think we all agree that the priority is finding someone with good library skills and experience. And we think if we do have someone like that, whether they have museums experience or not, they could handle that at the director level. It would be a plus if they had museums experience, but we don't see that as as a necessary part of it. So anyway, and I think we again view this as something that can always be revisited. If we do go ahead with it at this point, in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 10 years, that can always be revisited, because the museums is not technically under the library, and therefore not under the library board's jurisdiction. It's under the city manager's jurisdiction. So that's always going to be kind of a strange animal, and that can always either work or not work, I think, depending on the personalities involved. So that can always be revisited at a later date. We're not making this a decision forever, but we think it's appropriate to make, continue that for the time being in the recruitment process. So with that, Marcia, did you want to add anything more to any of those?
No, I'm fine. Thanks.
Okay, good. Then let me move, actually, I was going to say Inga, but let me move to Nat next, and then Inga last. So Nat, any additional overview comments you'd like to make, especially on some of the things I just talked about?
No, I think you outlined it very clear, Jim. I'm here to answer any questions to provide more context. But
okay,
thank you for the summary.
Inga, any additional introductory comments you'd like to make?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
I just wanted to add that I know that Nat is not retired and Inga is not retired, and they also work Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
Yes. In fact, some of our emails were right before and right after midnight on Sunday night. So anyway, so I think at this point we could ask if there are questions. If there's going to be some discussion, we should probably have that after we ask if there's any public input. So let me first start with, are there any questions before we ask for public input, and then we can have discussion in general. If no questions at this point, then Francesca, I'm sorry, Bob, go ahead.
Are you asking if we have questions about the class specification document of those three, or about the report that's in the agenda packet, or both?
I would say all of the above.
Okay. Well, I mean, because I have a whole bunch of questions. A lot of them refer to the packet page 9 that more or less deals with the process that you are planning to go through in selecting the search firm, and then also once they've selected, soliciting and sifting through applications. So that may be something that could be more easily put off, but in the class specification document, which is basically a revision and expansion of the job description that's already in the city directory of jobs. I have one question about that was added to the minimum qualifications, where it says an equivalent combination of education and experience may be considered. I don't know how 8 years of experience plus a master's in MLS, I don't know how it's like apples and oranges. I don't know how you can say, well, this person has the equivalent of that. Either they have it or they don't. It's like I say, it's like apples and oranges. So I find that ambiguous. And I was wondering, what you had in mind would be equivalent.
So let me just jump in. So that actually wasn't something that we added. That was something that was in the previous job description. And the best example that comes readily to mind is we had to do this. We also have similar language for librarian recruitment. We hired somebody from Canada. And so her library degree was equivalent to one accredited by the American Library Association. We currently also have somebody who obtained her library degree in Ireland. And so again, it's comparable to an American Library Association degree, but it's not one granted by the American Library Association.
So to comment on that question, my understanding was if somebody had, say, 7.5 years of experience, but a PhD, or equivalently 16 years of library experience and maybe not that degree, that would be okay. Am I misunderstanding that?
I think
thought it was the combination.
I think all of that is our possibilities, and I also think this language about an equivalent combination, I believe is, and maybe Nat can help me with this, but I think that's standard language in all job classifications. Is not unique to this one at all.
That's correct, Jeff. It is for us to be able to not be so strict. These are what we strive to achieve, but as many of you know, it's becoming harder and harder to recruit. And if someone has a Master of Library Science degree, but only 7 years of experience, but have other education, it doesn't exclude them from the process. So it gives a little bit of flexibility.
Then the last thing on this page that I wanted to ask about, just define for me where it says experience, 8 years of increasingly responsible experience, blah, 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 administration at a supervisory level. Does that mean that ideally we'd want the person to have 8 years of supervisory level experience, or 8 years of professional public library administration experience, maybe culminating, moving up the pecking order and ending up being in a supervisory level? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Do they need to be a supervisor for 8 years, or is it 8 years working in a library and, good work, they've been rewarded and promoted, and now they're at a supervisory?
The way I would read that, and would welcome other thoughts, but the way I would read that would be 8 years at a supervisory level. And I think that's no change from before, but.
No, it's the same wording. I didn't understand it before either, but we didn't have to look for a director before. So that's why I wanted to clarify. So we're expecting them to have 8 years under their belt at that level, not 8 years in library work, culminating in that high of a level.
And I think at the supervisory level, I think to clarify doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be 8 years of library director experience.
Oh, no, yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And also it's professional. So it's not that, for the first 6 you were a library page and then you became a library assistant supervisor, and the last year you were got your library degree and became a manager. But I think, for instance, somebody who is a professional librarian and oversaw some employees under them, then they became a library manager, and worked as a manager for many years. I think that would be sort of the path that we're looking at in their professional career.
Okay, and because I have other questions that are really more serious, I will just mention one more thing, and visualizing me with big tongue in cheek. On the third page of the class specification under physical demands, Inga clearly did not satisfy the second one, which was ability to work in a seated position, because we know she got one of those stand-up desks. And we should make that a flexible requirement. I do have a question, though, about the first bullet point there, where it says walking between work areas. Doesn't that have ADA implications? Because if somebody's wheelchair bound, they're not going to walk from one work location to another. And I don't know if that could be perceived as in any way, prejudice against somebody that can't walk from well, one work area or between working areas.
Well, that may be a good point. I could easily see changing the word walking to transporting or some other thing.
Moving.
Moving, just
Between-
moving, yeah.
moving.
Or transferring between work areas or something like that. But I just didn't like the word walking, considering the considerations that we want to make for ADA folks right now.
And to that, you could add standing is also the problem. The next thing it says standing. If you're.
Yeah,
if
any
you
words
can't
like
stand.
that we think might be taken the wrong way or limiting or something to folks that, receive ADA considerations, I would like to make sure we don't open up ourselves for any kind of criticism.
I think that's a good point, Bob. And I think what I'd suggest is that we can ask Nat to coordinate with Human Resources on wordsmithing that a little bit so that to address the questions I think you're raising, which I think are good ones. Are you okay with that, Nat?
Yep, I'm totally fine with that, and thank you for your comments this week.
Good. Any other questions before we ask for public input and move on to discussion? I know Bob has some other things, but I think you were thinking maybe that could be under discussion after public input. Is that right?
Yeah, it's related to some things in the procedures that you've outlined on
Sure.
package page 9 and, well, package page 9 primarily.
Okay. Any other questions before we ask for public input? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on this, on item number 2?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. And at this time, there are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Great. Thank you very much, Francesca. Then we'll move on to discussion. And Bob, do you want to start?
Well, for the sake of consistency, if we look at packet page 9, the very first sentence in under discussion, it says Library and Museums Director Inga Waite, and that's the way she is identified at the head of various of our packet pages in the agenda. At other times, it's just Library Director, and the job description is headed Library Director. So I would just suggest that and the title under her face right now that I'm looking at says Library and Museums Director. So I guess
Are you
for the sake of
suggesting?
clarity, we should call it one thing consistently.
Okay.
And I like the idea of Library Director, and we list responsibility for the museum part of that because it's a small part, just amongst the job, the duties, but not that museums be part of the director, because people might look at that and say, well, it's 50-50, and it's nowhere near 50-50. It's, I think, didn't we say 90-10 or something like that when that shift in responsibility took place, or something like that. But anyhow, I would just like the wording to be consistent throughout.
So I'll just point out that often there is a job specification, a job spec, and then there's what's called a working title.
Yep.
And so when I call myself the Library and Museums Director, that's my working title. And it makes sense when I'm doing museum work that museum is in my title. But for the spec, we were keeping it at Library Director.
I was going to say exactly the same thing you said, which there's no plan on changing the title of this position. It would be recruited as Library Director. It's in the job classification, all of our city code documents, our position control list as Library Director, and I only see the references Library Museums Director as a working title on Inga's email signature and Zoom. Those are the only few cases I see.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Is everybody doing kind of?
Right. I think it's really important that it says Library Director because for recruitment purposes, because otherwise you might get somebody who's never done anything in a library but has been a museum director, and then you're going to get a bunch of those people applying, and we don't want that.
Yeah. So do we have a consensus that we're going to be using Library Director in this recruitment process, but that when it's useful, as Inga mentioned before, that library and museums director is a acceptable working title.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? I think by consensus, we're okay with that. Other comments or questions, Bob?
On packet page 9, where you have like a 12-step process from starting with issuing the request for proposals all the way down to negotiating a start date
Yes.
with the selected candidate. It's a little unclear to me in various points where it says receive and screen, review the list, review results. I'm not sure who, is it the entire board? Is it just you and Marcia being the ad hoc committee? You know, who's involved? And I understand why it would be just the ad hoc committee at some point, but when does the full board become the body that's reviewing or developing or receiving and all that?
When I drafted this agenda report, I kind of consciously decided to leave some of that a bit vague. So
Okay.
I'm not surprised it feels vague because that was my intent. And partly that was because usually, in my experience at least, that's the sort of thing that you kind of negotiate in terms of the contract with the executive recruiter, what they do, what the city does, what you do jointly. I certainly think if we're going to expedite the process, unless we're going to have a fairly amazing number of special meetings of the library board, that we don't want the library board involved in too many. I mean, they need to be involved in important parts of the process, but I don't think overly involved would be my kind of general reaction to that. And I think in many cases, an ad hoc committee could kind of represent the board in discussions, whether it's with the headhunter or with the human resources department. And I think that's important. But in my experience, sometimes headhunters actually do the initial interviews on their own. And they do a first screening before anybody from the city gets involved. In other cases, I've seen it the other way around, that somebody from the city is involved. And when I say city, I include library in that. I'm speaking generically when I say city. So again, in my mind, that's the sort of thing that also would depend on when's the next library board meeting. If we don't want to be scheduling a whole bunch of extra special meetings, if there's a board meeting coming up in the next few days, that's one thing. If it's in 3 weeks, that's another. So in my mind, some of that will end up being a bit of a judgment call if the board is comfortable with that. But I would envision the ad hoc committee being heavily involved.
So the other thing,
But there might be some things the headhunter would do on their own. But go ahead.
you know, I was going to say the other thing is starting with step 8, Bob. The library board is heavily involved.
Right. Yeah, I see that.
Reviewing that. The real gray area is, so if there's a ton of applications, it might be that the recruiter would screen out the total, you know, I don't want to, you know, the people who are just not qualified. People have, you know, people apply for jobs that they're not qualified. And we don't really want to waste, you know, spend time on that. And then we might whittle it down to some semi-finalists with the recruiter, or ask the recruiter to just whittle it down to semi-finalists. But starting from reviewing the semi-finalist results to finding the finalists, to interviewing the finalists, to, you know, I don't know who does the reference check. Sometimes we would do the reference check. Sometimes we would ask the recruiter to do, you know, so those kinds of things. The whittling down, the board would definitely be heavily involved in, everybody.
Yeah, in my mind, the entire board would definitely be involved in deciding who's going to be invited to the final interviews, and certainly participating in the final interviews and deciding on a director at the very minimum. If the time frame works out that they can be involved at other points in the process, then that might work out. But I think at the very minimum, they would clearly be involved in deciding who would be invited to the final interviews, and obviously participating in the final interviews and making the decision.
Yeah, like Marcia said, I think it's item 6 where it talks about reviewing a list of semifinalists And it says perhaps with the entire library board, in addition to the others on that list in item number 6. And I think, as she said, from a roughly with flexibility, that point in the process onward, the board would be involved. And prior to that, it would be the recruiters with the city manager and human resources and the ad hoc committee. I mean, that all makes 100% sense to me. I'm curious, and I think because I think it's so important, it talks about coordinating with the recruiter and including consulting with library staff. And I think including the staff in this process early on, and that's step number 3. So I would call that early on is very crucial. And I'm glad to see it up there. I'm curious, and you don't have to go into explanation now because it's probably something that the ad hoc committee would do with input maybe from the recruiter and their experience, but how to select the staff, how many paid, unpaid staff. I mean, how you get a good cross section so you can say we had representative staff input in the process. And I think that's the goal that we would seek when we include staff, is to say, well, we didn't just talk to, a person at a certain level in the staff hierarchy, but, we have a input representative the same way we do when we survey the staff about anything else. We try to get, a cross section or a representative sample anyhow.
In my experience, you could invite the whole staff.
That's up to whoever's making that decision. But
Right.
I just wanted to chime in and say, I think that's a very important component at that point.
I would think as inclusive as possible, just to get input would be a great idea.
Yeah. I would think it would, in my opinion, it'd be good to consult with the recruiter on exactly how to do that. But I would tend to agree. The more, the better, as long as it's workable logistically.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just comment to, I agree with Jim's comments and yours. There can be pros and cons to how staff is involved, ensuring that from the get-go we identify what are the areas that perhaps a survey of staff, but in terms of actual interview process, that's where it can become challenging. As you all know. When we went through the hiring of our finance director, we were very deliberate in the manner in which staff was involved to provide feedback, just to ensure that it's an inclusive process. So we can talk more, of course, once the recruiter has been selected.
I'll just chime in that in recruiting my predecessor, I think that the ad hoc subcommittee narrowed it down to about 5 finalists that were then interviewed by the board. So rather than having the initial however many applications, 60 or something, all reviewed by the board, they really narrowed it down. The other thing, of course, is, we have to be careful about staff involvement in hiring, because it's the person that's then going to supervise them. So I think we definitely want to know what are the staff looking for and hoping for in a new director, and that might be best done with a survey. When I was my involvement when I was a manager in hiring my predecessor was I wound up taking the finalists on a tour of the facility. So that was my only exposure to the process
Yeah, and I would just add that, that there, in my mind at least, there's 2 very different aspects of the process that we're kind of talking about. One is getting input on the ideal qualifications for the library director that we're looking for, and the other is actually involvement in interviewing the candidates. And there are issues about confidentiality and other things that come into play that make that a little more tricky.
Right. Also, my understanding is that this process will take a while because, even the recruiters have until mid-March to submit their bona fides, and, we'll be working. So in March, some of these things may become at the next meeting or the meeting after that, some of these things will become clearer, or we can hash them out again
Right.
as the process takes shape.
Yeah, I would think once we have selected a recruitment firm, that they could make some sort of presentation on the process that they've come up with in conjunction with the ad hoc committee and HR and city manager's office, whoever's involved, and that to make sure the board's comfortable with the process that we'll be using from that point on.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments about any of the report documents or the things that were emailed yesterday? Do the trustees feel comfortable with the approach that we've laid out here? Because one of the things I was kind of hoping for was if the board does feel comfortable, that you could at least by consensus authorize the committee to move this process along, keeping the board involved, certainly at major points and even at lesser points when it works in a time frame, but to put an emphasis on trying to expedite the process and basically kind of authorizing the committee to move forward in a timely fashion where it feels like that's important, but obviously bringing things back to the board at critical points. Is there any concern about that kind of approach that anybody has? Harish?
I think it looks very good. It's very comprehensive. And if you're ready for approval, I'll make the motion.
Okay. I'm not totally sure we need a formal motion, but we certainly could. But Bob has a comment first, I think.
Back to packet page 9, the second paragraph under the discussion heading.
Yes.
I would just like to delete one word. In the first sentence, the second line, it says a committee consisting of Moreau and himself to help coordinate the recruitment process. I would like to drop the word help.
Okay. I think I don't see a problem with that. Does anybody? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, could we, Francesca, somehow indicate in the minutes that we're deleting that word help from that particular sentence, if that helps with Bob's concern there?
I
Okay.
just wanted it to read that you are coordinating it, not just helping in the coordination. I see that committee really being the
The driver.
front of the line. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of helping the library board coordinate as opposed to, it depends on who you're thinking is being helped, but I think by eliminating the word help, you remove that ambiguity perhaps. So that's probably a good suggestion. Okay. What's the pleasure of the board? Do we want a motion on this?
Well, we have a motion from Harish.
Yeah, did you
and-
why don't you go ahead and make a motion if you'd like, Harish?
Like a motion to accept the document as it is with the changes suggested by Bob.
Okay.
Trustee Betty.
Then I'll second.
And could I clarify that if we're talking about all of the documents that we had the suggested
second that.
we had the suggested modifications to the RFP letter related to diversity. Are you okay with those as well?
And a few changes in the, what do you call it? The executive, or the class
The
specification.
class spec, yes.
To do with disabilities that Nat will take care of.
Right.
Regarding the word law.
Those two, yes.
Harish and whoever seconded, are you okay including all of that in your motion?
Bob,
Bob Petty.
Yeah, I second it. And since you're asking, I agree 100% with the additions on page 2 of the letter to the recruiting firms about
diversity, inclusion.
diversity and everything.
Mhm.
But for example, it said a qualified, diverse candidates. We're not looking for a candidate who's diverse. We're doing, our strategy is looking for a diversity of candidates. the words were right. I just think they should be in different, where they should be located in the sentence is different.
Maybe it's qualified and diverse pool of candidates.
Sure.
Yeah,
It's the pool that you want diversity in, right?
And the approach is looking for, non-exclusivity and that sort of thing. It's not a candidate who is diverse. I mean,
Yeah, it actually says candidates, but I think by adding a word, a pool, I think that would be fine. I think that's a good suggestion. Does that work for you, Bob?
for seeking,
A qualified and diverse pool of candidates? How's that?
yeah, that way we're talking about the approach, not the
Right.
person, not the individual.
Right.
And where was the other, Jim showed us on the screen, where was the other additional word in that paragraph there?
The next to the last paragraph, the next to the last sentence in that paragraphs references and the qualifications of those staff members intended to work on this project, including their specific experience in conducting library director recruitments in an inclusive process.
That's good. I mean.
Yeah, okay, good. Nat is actually revising the
Oh.
document as we speak.
Yes.
Okay, experiencing, conducting director recruitments,
Yes.
I would say an inclusive process, seeking director recruitments or something like that. Again, focusing on the process rather than the individuals themselves. But that was less of a what to me than the first one.
I think this one, it talks about experience in conducting recruitments in an inclusive process. So
Library director recruitment specifically.
Yes. I think.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, yeah, the top change, great, and then leave that one the way it is changed.
Mhm.
okay, good.
Great.
So if I would friendly amendment to Harish's move, if those two changes are okay with him, then I will leave my second in place.
And Harish is nodding agreement with that.
I am indeed.
Okay, very good. Any other discussion on the motion? And Nat, did you have any concerns about any of the things that we have talked about in this
Not
motion?
at all. These are great changes and suggestions. Thank you.
Very good. If no further discussion, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Elguth,
Yes.
Joshi,
Yes,
Moreau,
Yes.
Petty,
Yes,
Thompson.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for a good discussion and good suggestions. Moving on, then the next item on our agenda is item number 3, to receive an update on the fiscal year 2022-23 budget process and provide direction to staff. Inga, would you like to amplify the report on that?
You're muted.
Thank you. Since our last meeting in January, we received on the 14th of February or maybe it was the Friday before, anyway, a timeline for the budget process, and it's a pretty tight timeline. And I think we've always said, and in our report last month, we said that depending on when deadlines were for submitting budget proposals to the finance team, we might need to have a special meeting. And so basically we sent out a request to you all to have a special meeting because we need to submit our budget proposal to finance on the 11th of March. So that wouldn't give us enough time to wait until our March meeting. So we are going to be meeting on March 10th at 1 p.m. Thank you all for making time to do that. And then you'll see from packet page 13, the next steps are once I submit the budget to the finance department, then finance will do an initial review. And then at the beginning of April, there will be an opportunity for a budget hearing where I can explain and answer questions about what it is that we're requesting. So I'm happy to take any questions about the budget sequence. I think at this time it would be helpful, since we know and we discussed at our last meeting that I would be requesting funds for positions, and the positions that we had asked for previously when we were doing a 2-year budget. But if you want to say anything about how you would prioritize those positions, that would be helpful. So for instance, we say we would like a full-time bookmobile driver. So that's as opposed to an RPT, regular part-time. So a bookmobile driver, and a youth librarian, full-time, because right now we just have PTS hours. A teen librarian,
Full-time?
full-time, and then currently we have a person who does the ordering for us, and because of a series of events having to do with seniority, that position isn't a full-time position where we had originally intended it to be a full-time library assistant 2 position. And just to remind you that every position we have would involves providing some work at the desk to help when people are out sick, when people are away for various reasons. Francesca provides desk hours. I would normally provide desk hours. We all pitch in. So any of these positions would help provide desk support. But so if we look at bookmobile, full-time bookmobile, full-time youth librarian, full-time teen librarian, and full-time person who's helping in acquisitions, do you have, it'd be helpful if you had any sense of priorities.
Can you not give us that information again and we discuss it on our special meeting on the 10th?
Yeah, I could.
Would it be helpful to get some sense from the board of that at this point, or are you okay waiting until the 10th?
I'm okay waiting, but it would be helpful if anybody had any particular ideas about it. So for instance,
Well, could I turn it around and ask you what your current
sure,
suggestions would be? And maybe
Sure.
we can let you know if we see it differently.
right. So I think that it's going to be hard to fill the bookmobile position, and I think having a full-time bookmobile driver will be more successful. We also look for somebody who's bilingual for that position, so it would be really helpful to have that position, and then that person also spends some time in the library working at the desk with their bilingual skills. So that is a position I would definitely say to me is worth having be full-time. Acquisitions, I would also say, is worth having that position be full-time because we've so drastically cut back the staff in that area. A youth librarian full-time, and then a teen librarian. It could be that the teen librarian position is not full-time until the following year, with the understanding that the youth librarian we get would have to have the ability to do teen programs as well.
Any board comments, trustee comments on any of Inga's tentative suggestions of priorities among those 4, or any other items that you think should be in the mix for that matter?
I just had a quick question. So youth librarian is for small children, right? And these are people who have skills in child development and that kind of stuff, right?
Right. And typically we like to have people specialize, because clearly there's a big difference working with babies and understanding their development stages, and working with teenagers and understanding their development stages and issues and so forth. And the programming that you do is intended to be helpful to meet them where they're learning. And so if you focus on babies and what babies need to do to gain literacy, it's different than, what is it that is important for teenagers. So there is that challenge.
Right. And I would I'm kind of concerned about the teenage after school, middle school and high school population, who are sort of not being served at all, or in a very limited way right now. And it seems to me that maybe that ought to be a higher priority if possible.
Right, and it is possible to say that a teen librarian would need to also be able to hop in and provide a backup for a story time or something like that. And when we had a teen librarian, Ebony was able to do a story time if and when needed to fill in gaps.
So maybe that one would be more important, I would think. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I was kind of leaning towards having one of those two, either the youth librarian or teen librarian, as my top priority, actually.
Yeah.
But again, any other, as Bob said, we may want to mull this over a bit more and provide more direction later. But any other comments at this point from Bob or Jennifer or Harish? Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm fading in and out, but I would strongly support a full-time teen librarian because just my own experience of the influx of high school students that you're going to get at 3:15 every single day, that's a golden opportunity to create your future constituents and your readers. They need attention. And, I'm not saying I don't support a youth librarian. I think that's fine and good, but that teens always seem to get left out and they need a lot of attention. So I would certainly support that.
Harish or Bob? Bob?
If the ideal would be to have a library who specializes in each of these different age groups. Is it the case that all the rest of the librarians are the ones that are responsible for adult programs? I mean, I participated, I guess it was Tuesday, in Sean's most recent one, a Zoom class about John Steinbeck. And there were almost 100 people in attendance at that program day before yesterday. And I know Francesca has coordinated programs designed for adults and reflected in our statistics for how popular they are amongst adults. But is it just sort of by committee, or not committee, by group? Or, I mean, there's not one librarian that just does adult, like there might be one librarian doing teen.
Well, we do have adult services librarian, and that is Sarah's position. And
okay.
That's adult programming. And then we have a local history and reference position, and that's Sean, and his focus is primarily on adults and adult programming. So he does the genealogy programs and the history programs. So we already have 2 librarians who they focus on that, and we have Sarah's going to be doing a story time, her very first one for St. Patrick's Day, because the PTS that we have, that person is not available. And Sean has done class tours for younger folks. So everybody is flexible.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to add a quote adult librarian. I was just wondering how the adult programs were. Let's say we got the youth and teen librarians that we wish for, who would be the, not officially, but the adult librarian. And you've said that at least between those two, they, sort of share the duty. So that's good, because they've been so successful, all of them recently.
Harish.
So do we have budget for both those positions? Or are we deciding between one or the other, or half and half or something?
So we can submit the budget for all of those positions, but it's not likely that all of the positions that we want, even when we're trying to be very conservative with our requests, are going to be funded. So it will probably come to the point in the budget hearing that I'll be asked, which is the highest priority if you can't have all of them.
Understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do we have a bit of a consensus that a teen librarian is probably the top priority? And again, we can talk about it more on the 10th, but if that's helpful to get some sense of that, I thought we could.
Well, I mean, to me, I would qualify that by asking Inga, are we stuck in acquisitions and dead in the water? I mean, how desperate would, I mean, suppose you only have one position and it was teen librarian, could the library go on? And that's
Right. Well, we'll be limping. We'll be limping without the others. We're very far behind in our acquisitions at this point. But it's because we're changing the way we're doing acquisitions. With the bookmobile, that 30-hour-a-week position has been vacant since November. We're still waiting for a green light to open a recruitment. And we'll see how, if we get applicants for a 30-hour-a-week position. One of the things that our bookmobile drivers have done in the past is they go to preschools, so they do story times. So when we have that position filled, there'll be another person who can help out with some story times.
Bob, did you have additional comment?
Well, I was just going to say, Marcia's right on, because in every survey with G4 and all the other surveys we've done, the number one concern of the respondents has been the collection and the circulation of materials. And if we're not staffed to keep up with that demand, then I think we're really not meeting the very explicit requests and needs of our constituents. And I mean, every survey has produced that result.
so that's the balance, I think, is the core functions of the library versus different populations. And that's, we can take it up again next time, but that's the issue.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to give you any clear consensus at this point, Inga. Maybe we can chew on this a bit more and revisit on the 10th. But I'm wondering, in addition to those 4 positions, I'm hoping we're thinking about trying to find a way to be open more hours, or maybe an evening, and also a larger materials budget. Are those things you're also considering?
Yes, and actually adding full-time staff makes it more possible for us to be open longer hours or an additional day, because we don't typically have our hourly folks be in charge with a full set of keys and all the training that's needed to respond to incidents and so forth. So when we have full-time positions or regular part-time positions, that helps expand our coverage, our hours coverage.
Anybody else want to provide tentative guidance to Inga on this, or you rather wait until later?
To be continued.
To be continued. Is there anything in particular you were hoping to get out of us that you haven't? I realize you didn't get a real clear indication on that issue, but was there anything else you wanted to try to query us on?
No,
Okay.
that's fine. And just to remind you all that we did talk about this last year. We were kind of focused on the year right in front of us, but we did also land on a budget for this coming year. So I'm just making some changes to what had been previously submitted.
Francesca, can you remind me? I think I may have forgotten to ask for public input on this before we got into a general discussion. Is that correct?
Yes.
It may be a little later than it should have been, but could you nonetheless ask if there's any public comment on item number 3?
Of course. To make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Okay, thank you very much, Francesca. Then let's move on then to item number 4, which is a first reading of the proposed revisions to Library Board Policies 150, 175. I guess it's just those 2. I thought there was a third. Inga, could you give us at least a short overview on this item?
Sure. So just as a reminder, there is an ad hoc policy revision committee, and we're looking at the different policies that look like they need some review. And so this is the first reading of the next two policies on our list, which are sort of like the low-hanging fruit. And that is policy 150, which is access to the California History Room, and policy 175, which was loan of laptops. So for access to the local history collection, basically the main change is just that we were referring to staff positions that we no longer have. We refer over and over again to the archivist, and that's a position we haven't had for many years. And then also the assistant library director, and that's a position we haven't had since 2013. So, and then also in the collateral, you know, what do you need to leave at the desk in order to be let into the room? And we say driver's license and some other things, but we don't mention passports. And of course, we do have international visitors, and they sometimes want to leave passports. So those were the changes for the policy having to do with, that we're proposing for the policy that has to do with access to the local history room. And then for policy 175, which is loan of laptops, telescopes, and other devices, a staff member mentioned that there is no maximum fine for keeping a laptop, and it's $5 per hour. So the proposal there is that we cap it at $50. And since we're only open 8 hours a day to the public, it's not likely that we would reach that cap of $50, but that was consistent with what the maximum fine is for telescopes. So those are the two policies that are before you in the packet.
Okay, thank you. Any trustee questions of Inga before we ask for public input? Bob?
Well, I guess it might be a question. On packet page 17, where it says pending, do you want March 24th or February 24th?
So because it requires 2 readings, so this is the first reading, and then
Okay, and then go to packet page 21, and it doesn't say pending, it says proposed. Is that still, should that be March or should that be February 24th? Because are you not proposing it now? On packet page 21, there's that list of dates, and it says proposed March 24th.
oh, you're right, it should say pending.
Okay, either pending or proposed February, or one of those parts of that little line were wrong.
I think to be consistent, why don't we view it as pending in March 24th for the second reading?
Okay.
Yes,
And
Any other-
to go into the history room, they only have to leave one of those documents at the desk, not more than one, right? Any one of those?
right, any one of those.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Any other questions? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 4?
Yes, to make a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca. Any other comment on this or any wordsmithing before we bring it back for second reading at the next meeting? Seeing none, I don't think we need any formal action. We'll bring it back for the second reading at the next meeting. And speaking of second readings, the next item on our agenda, number 5, is the second reading and adoption of several policies that we had at first reading at our last meeting. And I know there were some wordsmithing changes that Inga has made to those policies based on our discussion at the first reading. Is there any other overview comments you'd like to make on item 5, Inga?
No, simply that the only policies that have been changed are the 2 that you suggested some wordsmithing to, and one was policy 190, and then the other was policy 501, and those corrections are reflected in your the attachments to the packet.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Inga before we ask for public input? If not, Francesca, could you see if anybody wants to speak to item number 5?
Yes, to make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca. Is there further discussion on this? This one, I think we will require a motion on after discussion. Jen, was that a hand raised or a, no? Okay, good. Bob, did you have a comment or motion?
No, I was going to move that we adopt the changes to the library board policies listed in item number 5 as presented.
Second,
Bob has made the motion and Marcia has seconded it to adopt the listed items in the second reading. Is there any further discussion? If not, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Felguth,
Can't hear you.
He's muted.
Yes.
thank you. Joshi,
Can't hear you either, Harish. You're muted. You're
Little
muted.
red mic is there.
Yeah, yes,
Yes, okay, good. Thank you.
Moreau,
yes.
Petty,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes, so that item carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And thank you to Inga and the ad hoc committee that's done quite a bit of work on all these policies. I hope we're keeping them all straight. I think we are.
And just so you know, those of you who have policy packets that are hard copy, Francesca will be sending you the replacements. And then David will be updating the website for those of you who refer to the website for the policies.
Very good. But you'll only do that after the second reading, right?
Right.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Thank you both. Appreciate that. Then moving on to item 6. I'm sorry, was there a comment? Or just a cough, maybe? Okay, moving on to item number 6 then, which is to receive a report from the ad hoc survey committee.
Okay, so the survey ends on the 28th. So once the survey ends, we're going to quickly get the survey results to the committee and then have a meeting to look them over so that we have any recommendations based on survey results that might influence our budget discussion on the 10th. One of the things that I pointed out is that since January, we've only had 24 more responses to the survey, even though it went out in City Focus, which has a very wide distribution, and it's been going out in our e-blasts, and our new PTS youth librarian tried to encourage parents to fill out the survey when they were there for story time. So we don't have a ton of responses. But last month, 60% of our respondents were 66 or older, and now that's dropped down to 57%. So at least our efforts have gotten a few younger folks responding. Still nobody from the under 20 age group. And of course, I think that's a huge reflection on the fact that we don't have a teen librarian. So even though staff approach younger kids and say, hey, would you care to fill out the survey, there isn't a person focused on teens who is including it in her or his programs.
Okay, thank
Did
you.
any of the committee members want to say anything? That would be
Yes, our committee is Jennifer and Bob. Do either of you have anything you'd like to add? Bob.
A question for Inga. When the teens come into the library, they come in on their own. But when the younger youth, the kids, especially the really young ones, come in, it's often with parents. Do we collect any contact information with the parents or families? Because I'm wondering if we do, because an 8-year-old isn't going to fill out this survey, but the mother of the 8-year-old who maybe brings the kid in for a program could be interested in filling out the survey. So do we have any way of contacting the families, the parents of the younger kids whom we're not, catching, like you say, nobody under 20? Well, it doesn't surprise me that a 16-year-old doesn't fill it out, but how about a 8-year-old?
right. So we we're doing very few programs at this point. We are doing a weekly story time. And so the librarian who's doing the story time has talked it up at the story time and had paper copies of the survey to fill out during story time, but the parents have declined filling it out and said, oh, I'll go and do it online, but then they don't seem to have followed up and done it online. But we have tried to talk to parents that show up, but we don't do a registration the way we do for adult programs. So we
couldn't look at last year's data of what families brought young kids to programs and then, send them an email blast or something. That we just don't have the information.
Right. We don't take registrations for most of our youth programs are drop basis. Yes.
Okay, good thought. Any other questions? Actually, I have one question myself. I think you already mentioned this in your introductory comments, Inga, but could you clarify whether you think, given that we aren't closing the survey till February 28th, that we will be able to compile the results in time to give it to the board for the special budget meeting on March 10th?
Yes, so the results are compiled as they come in by SurveyMonkey. So it's just a matter of printing out those results and sharing them with the people that we need to share them with. So the first group will be the subcommittee, and those results can go to the subcommittee, but we can also include a full printout of all the results in the packet that goes to the board for the March 10th meeting.
Yeah, I for one would like to see at least a summary of it, whether it needs to be a full printout or not. I kind of leave that up to you in the subcommittee, but I think some sense of the survey data would be helpful for that budget discussion. Very good. And Marcia.
No, I was just going to add, unfortunately, the people who don't have the librarian are the ones that are not responding, which is the teens and the youth people. But maybe the fact that we don't have any responses for them in itself will inform the budget decision.
Yeah. Okay. Francesca, could you see if we have any public comment on item number 6?
Yes. To make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand, or if you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other comments on item number 6? If not, moving on to item number 7, which is to receive a staff update on the bookmobile replacement project and California State Library grant. Inga, anything you'd like to add?
Well, the report gives you a brief summary. I'm sorry that Kim Smith is not here because she is our lead for this grant project, but she's away this week. And so I cut and pasted some things out of her great grant application, and you can see that we really focused on meeting the needs of folks that were disadvantaged. And it's pretty interesting to look at the statistics that show, how many people have cars in the different neighborhoods, or what percentage are low income in the areas where we're currently taking the vehicle. And then there's a calendar on the final page of the report, packet page 42, and you'll see that even though we're starting the process now, we don't anticipate that we'll have a new bookmobile for a year. And that's partly because of the delays with supplies because of the pandemic.
And sometimes fires on ships that are carrying vehicles if they come from Europe or somewhere. Yeah, interesting. Okay, questions for Inga?
So Inga, does that mean that normally it wouldn't take a year? Because that's what I have circled in red on the sheet here. That my God, it takes a year to put together a bookmobile, and is that length of time solely due to the transport issues that we've had recently?
Yes, that's my understanding. I spoke with 2 different vendors, and a lot of it has to do with what chassis, since we're looking at a Sprinter van. So what chassis do they have in stock? Because they'll take what they have in stock and then customize it for the customer. And then how many orders are they receiving? And one vendor said that once we placed an order, they would be able to start the process in August. So just there's a whole demand issue, and then there's a access to the vehicles issue that we're facing.
The Sprinter van, because it sounds like you pretty much focused on that or narrowed it down. That's a Mercedes product?
There's also a Ford that is,
Yeah.
Can be a Sprinter as well.
And so you're saying Sprinter is kind of a generic name for that type and size of vehicle.
Right.
And if I'm right, it's smaller than the current gargantuan one that we have, and therefore doesn't require the same kind of driver's license?
So it's actually the gargantuan one that we have, which is 30 feet long, doesn't require a special driver's license, but
It
it
doesn't.
does. No, and it's an extra wide and long vehicle, and it does require special skill in driving it. And as our head of vehicle maintenance said, you've got an oversized vehicle for a narrow street town, something like that. So it's just takes skill to drive it, and a
But
lot
the
of
Sprinter
staff.
is smaller, right?
Right. So the Sprinter would be 5 feet shorter,
Right.
which is great, and then will be narrower, so it will feel less like a vehicle that you want to really hang out in to browse, but you'll still be able to browse. And one of the features that we're going to do with the vehicle is you can have carts that lock into place and look like shelving. And so we know that we go to 2 stops on a day that are have a population that is very interested in large print materials and mysteries, and not interested in children's materials. So we can roll on carts and lock them into place, and it'll just look like, oh, look at all the large print shelves that we have. But then when we go to the other 2 stops on another day that are really focused on families, we can roll off the large print, just keep a little bit of it, and then roll on all the picture books and chapter books and that sort of thing. So
That is great. So we can customize it from Park Lane to the playground.
and the other great thing that I'm excited about is we could do lobby stops at the Park Lane, which is where you actually roll your content into the lobby and you bring a little folding table and your laptop. And that way folks can sit down in between browsing and can, socialize more with one another. And so it's really a convenience for the customers to bring the material more to them. And because it will have a wheelchair lift, we can lower and raise the carts easily to get them into the lobby.
That sounds great. That's so versatile, and it just feels like improvement has drenched me. And I have some close friends who, after a lot of consideration, sold a house and are going to be moving into Park Lane. And I said, hey, guess what? We'll visit Park Lane regularly. And they were just thrilled to death. And when I told them that, that's one of the first stops that we are going to resume doing, and that we're getting a new vehicle and all of that. And what you just described, I wasn't aware of, where you can customize, what's on the shelves without having to take them all off and put a whole new, few dozen books on the shelf. You can just swap out the shelves and even move them into the lobby. That's just wonderful.
Yeah, we're excited.
Very good. If I could just piggyback on one of the comments that Bob and Inga were just having about the driving of our current vehicle, my understanding is that even though it doesn't require a special driver's license, it is difficult to drive, and the vast majority of staff want no part of driving it. They're uncomfortable driving it. And with the new proposed vehicle, we're hoping it'll be much easier to have a variety of staff be able to do it, be able to cross-train and have more backup in case the bookmobile driver isn't available. And I think that'll be another major advantage of this vehicle as well. Any other questions for Inga? Jennifer?
just as a former bookmobile librarian for City of Monterey, who used to have to parallel park by Troya's Market in front of Portola Vista, I'm thrilled to hear what you're talking about. That's going to be great.
Yeah, and it'll have a backup camera too, which will make
Oh,
it.
yeah. Now, if you could just get rid of the tourists who flip U-turns in front of you, causing you to hit the brakes and lose 4,000 books in one fell swoop, you'd have it made. But no, that I really like the idea of being able to bring the book carts into Park Lane. That was always a very productive stop, but it was so difficult for some of the clientele to be able to get in and be able to support themselves long enough to go ahead and browse. So these are all good things as far as extending services to our community.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, maybe this is a good time to ask Francesca to see if there's any public comment on item number 7.
Yes, to make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand or dial *9 if connected by phone. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Okay, very good. Any other comment on item number 7?
Quick one. We've been talking about getting an electric vehicle. Is this Sprint is an electric vehicle?
No, so the electric vehicle will be the next vehicle that we get. And the idea there is to get a very small little electric vehicle, the kind that can be driven on a lawn, the kind that you see gardeners using and so forth. And the great thing about those is we do get invited to the Easter egg hunt event and to a language festival and different festivals and events like that. And typically now we either have a big vehicle and so we get parked somewhere on the outskirts of all the fun activity, or we set up a tent, but then we have to haul all of our gear there. And the great thing about one of these little electric vehicles is it attracts people because it's so small, and the sides would sort of flip up, and then you'd have all these bookshelves. You can have storage area for a table and a laptop. And so you can also do what's called a pop-up library, which is you can go to a park, you can go to unexpected places and be there and sort of publicize the library. And the wonderful thing too, I think, is that with the logos and so forth on the outside of the vehicle, you can really promote the city and the city's green initiatives. So it's not just promotion for the library, but it's promotion for the city as well. And to watch one of these under construction, I'm really excited that while we got our grant, the Pacific Grove Public Library got a grant to do an electric vehicle. So I keep sending them all the information that I come across with libraries that have electric vehicles, because I can't wait to have them get their project started and then see how it develops and how well it serves Pacific Grove.
Very good. Any other comments on item number 7?
The small vehicle, Inga and I have talked about this before. This is the same kind of thing that, frankly, I was one of the 2 docents at Point Lobos that got started, and we call it our MINT van for mobile interpretation, MINT, because we take it to parts of the reserve at Point Lobos where there are docents aren't regularly stationed for a shift, and so we drive it usually down to the Bird Island parking lot, which is way at the southern end. And there are a lot of people that go there, visitors, but it's not the information station where docents are on shift or the whaler's cabin. And it has the sides that pop up, make like little awnings in their shelves. It's called a Max van that fits on the back of what starts out to be a mini flatbed truck. And you can store, we have all kinds of artifacts and otter pelts and bird models and tables and chairs and everything. And we set it up, and in fact, I just did it a few days ago, and I mean, Inga's not exaggerating when you say it really attracts, and people see that, and maybe they're not expecting it there, and you can take it, to county fairs and all those other kinds of things that she mentioned. That will be a fantastic addition to our mobile library services. And I can say that, from firsthand experience.
Very good. Thank you for those comments, Bob. So we have two vehicles, one at a time, to look forward to adding to our library services. Very good. Next item on our agenda is informational reports and staff comments, which includes items 8 and 9, as well as any verbal reports that the director may have or other staff. So let's start with item number 8, the financial report. Anything you'd like to add to that, Inga? Item number 8.
No, other than that the mid-year budget, which is when we'll be getting some corrections, is going to go before the council on the 1st of March, the first meeting in March for the council. And so we'll see a little bit of some different numbers after that has happened.
Very good.
Yeah, but I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions for Inga on this before public comment? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 8?
To make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand or dial *9 if you are connected by phone. Chair Thompson, there are no public comments.
Okay, any other discussion or comments on item number 8? If not, let's move on to item number 9, which is receive the statistical report. Anything you'd like to highlight there, Inga?
Well, this is a very small thing, but I'm very grateful that David was able to make a change so that now the footer on the bottom of the printed packet no longer blots out the number of hours that volunteers work, because we're so grateful for our volunteers and we kept hiding those numbers with this big footer that printed across the bottom of the page. So
yes, thank you very much. I think Harish had noted a problem with that, and I did as well. So thank you very much for fixing that. And thank
and
you.
hopefully the font is not too small to read the report.
And by the way, speaking of thanking staff such as Inga and David, in this case, I meant to, on the previous item, ask Inga if you would extend our continued appreciation to Kim for the work on getting the funding for the bookmobile and overseeing that project. We very much appreciate the progress that we're making on that, and that'll be a great improvement. I think is clear to all of us.
Thank you. I'll let her know that.
Good, thank you. Any other questions on number 9 before we ask for public input?
I'd like to know something. We seem to have fairly large number of people coming to the help desk for checkout. Are we collecting any information on why they're doing that rather than going to the self-checkout? Do we have some feel for what's wrong with the self-checkout or what makes them uncomfortable perhaps? And same thing with the app, those numbers are very low, ridiculously low. So I'm just curious if you're gathering any data when somebody comes in to find out why they feel.
Actually, the self-checkout at 7,733 for January 22, is much larger than the help desk.
Right. I did think that the self-checkout numbers have grown significantly.
Right.
So,
And it also looks like, the items checked out at the help desk dropped by 50% from 21 to 22.
but for the app, I have my explanation, which is we don't have our signs out. So we really need to have signs up. And so I just have to make sure that staff follow through with that because we have talked about it. And also making it more prominent on our website. I don't think that we can easily find it. So those two things I think will make a difference. And then probably mention it again in an e-blast. And we had a very fun video that Carl made, and so we have to figure out how to do more promotion with that video. We did show it on Facebook and it was well received, but we need to do more promotion for the app.
If I may make a suggestion, when you put the link on your website, have somebody where you can enter the phone number, it sends a link directly to your phone that you click and it goes into the installation, rather than going through the search for the patron app and then find this, find that, something like that. Make it easy, make it more straightforward.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how that would work, but so it would just be a link that then when you click on it, it goes directly to the App Store?
Yeah, and the
Okay.
particular item in the App Store. So all
Oh,
that
okay.
information is embedded. So the link that you send to the phone has that built in.
So it would be a link to the Android App Store or the Google App Store and to the Apple App Store. Is that what you're thinking?
Right.
So
Right. You have one
I
link.
think you
for
need
each.
to have, you need to have it to both of the major
Mhm,
app stores, I think.
correct.
But I'm not quite sure how the phone number part works, but I think the link part, I understand. So, okay, that sounds good.
Good. Any other questions about the statistical report? Actually, I have one question. It's been very helpful seeing the comparison from our current year to 2 years ago. But I think starting in March, it's going to be less helpful because 2 years ago in March is when we closed the library. And so my suggestion would be that instead of showing data from 2020 for the comparison, we switch starting next month to 2019 so that we're able to compare to a year prior to COVID, if that makes sense and if that data is still readily available. Is everybody okay with that suggestion to staff? As far as you know, Inga, do you think that's probably workable?
So I know that you can compare 1 year to the preceding year. So in other words, we would still have 2020, but it would be compared to 2019. And then we would have 2022 compared to 2021.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the way I do it when I look at these, I circle the current, like in this case, I circle January 22 and then I circle January 20, and those are the two columns, the only ones I really pay much attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be the same thing, except we instead of it being March 2020, we'd be looking at March of 2019 is what I'm suggesting.
Yes.
Because starting in March of 2020 is when, pardon the phrase, well, I won't use the phrase, things went sideways. I'll just put it that way.
Good. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, very good. Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 9, the statistical report?
Yes, to make a public comment, raise your Zoom hand or dial *9. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments on the statistical report?
I just want to mention that even though the absolute numbers are lower, roughly the proportion of items checked out at self-check compared to the total number of MPL items checked out is about the same whether you look at 2022 or 2020, even though the number is much lower now than it was 2 years ago. So, I'm not sure that usage of that way of taking items out of the library has changed all that much. It's just the total number of people that are using the library.
Okay. And I think since we're talking about the reports, we should note that overall usage is down.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that I know the city manager's office has asked us as we're looking at our budget. They want to make sure that we grow our services, but in keeping with demand. And I think we all know that a lot of folks are still being hesitant about going out into public much. And so that's sort of part of our strategy that we had all along, is to gradually reopen, not just bounce back to exactly the way it was previously. But that's something to keep in mind. What do the numbers look like?
And refresh my memory, Inga, how many hours a week were we open prior to the pandemic?
52.
So
we were
one way
8
of
hours.
one way of looking at it is that we're currently open about 77% as many hours as we were prior to the pandemic. And I did look at a couple of other numbers compared to the what is it, January of 2020. And if you look at the number of total number of visits, were in January of 22, it was 45% of the number in January of 20. And if you look at the number of at circulation, it's 62% of the number in January of 20. So we're open 77% as many hours. We have 62% as much circulation and 45% as many visits. So there's a number of ways you could interpret that information, but I thought that was interesting to look at it in terms of percentages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So any other comments on the statistical report? If not, then we'll move on to the any director verbal reports.
Sure. So I did send out an email to you all. I forwarded an email to you all about a half an hour before our meeting started. It's just information that I thought would be helpful for you to have, but I'll just quickly tell you basically what it was. Is last week, you probably all know that the governor made some changes in terms of COVID protocols, and also Cal OSHA made some changes as well. They all happened to take place on the 16th, and which was a week ago. And for employees, the change is that employees who are vaccinated do not need to wear masks when they are at work. And then for the public, for Monterey, Monterey is keeping with what the county has decided and also what the state has decided. The Cal CDPH has decided that in public facilities, if you are vaccinated, masks are optional. If you are unvaccinated, masks are required. And in our case, we don't screen at the doors. We have 2 sets of doors. We don't screen for vaccinations, and we don't have the staffing capacity or the authority from our staff to screen for vaccinations. So that means now when you walk into the library, the people that are milling around, some have masks on, some don't have masks on. Hopefully it's the honor system. Hopefully those who aren't vaccinated are wearing masks, but we don't have any way to ensure that. And then staff, for the most part, have just chosen to wear masks when they're working with the public. And so we talked about it with staff, and they said it'd be great to have some talking points. So I sent some talking points out, and then I shared them with you. Staff, of course, don't need to be asked if they are wearing a mask. You know, they don't need to respond if somebody says, "Oh, does that mean you're unvaccinated because you're wearing a mask?" You know, that would be an inappropriate thing for a staff member to have to deal with. So we were sort of trying to reassure them about how to respond to those sorts of questions. And then also if there's hearsay, you know, somebody comes up and says, "I know that person over there isn't vaccinated," you know, how do you respond to those kind of hearsay comments? And so far that we had a lot of concern about the change, but so far it seems to be going well. There haven't been a lot of negative customer interactions. We did take the computer station that the public could use to apply for library card and so forth, that was at the desk. We took that away because staff were just concerned about having somebody stand next to them for a really long time when you didn't know, you know, were they vaccinated or not. So staff seem to be doing well with it, and the public, for the most part, most people seem to still be wearing masks. So about 75% of the folks in the building are still wearing their masks. So that's a big change for us, but seems to be going okay.
Very good. Thank you for that update. It's not on our agenda, so we can't really discuss it at any length, but does anybody have any quick questions about this? Bob?
I checked my email in time to see that before the meeting, and I had planned to ask about it because it really bothers me, and I'm very concerned. In your email, you cite the fact that Monterey County Board of Supervisors has a masking ordinance in place for all county-operated public facilities. County library is closed today, but I assume it would apply to them as well as any other county facility, so all of the libraries in the Monterey County system. I checked with Carmel and PG libraries. They are still requiring masks of everybody who walks in, no honor system questions. You don't have to worry about it. So I'm wondering why in heaven's name are we now saying, hey, you don't have to wear a mask in here. We're just going to trust you and create possible ambiguity, hard feelings, unsafe conditions. Why are we not saying, like those other entities, everybody still needs a mask?
Right. So I did survey the other libraries, and the county librarian said that same thing about that because the Board of Supervisors hasn't rescinded the ordinance at the time that I talked to her, they would be requiring masks. What the city attorney told me repeatedly was, we don't have legal grounds. So in the case of the county libraries, they have an ordinance, and so they have to follow the ordinance. We don't have legal grounds to point to say, you know, because of this, whatever this is, we're requiring masks.
But the state order that started all of this sort of domino effect of reducing the mandate for being masked specifically says that individual entities can make their own rules. It's just that they're not required to require masks. And, you know, other libraries, not just the county ones, because of the Board of Soups not making any changes. Like I said, PG and Carmel are still requiring masks. So, you know, it just really bothers me that we're not being as safe as we possibly could.
I think since it's not on the agenda, that's probably as far and maybe even further than we should go on this subject. But if there is a concern, maybe Inga, do you think
have further discussion with
would it be worthwhile to ask the city attorney to, I don't know, could either give Bob a phone call or could provide us something in writing? I don't know which is more efficient, but unless
Again, it's not that we're, it's not, even the state law says we don't have to, but it doesn't say we can't require masks.
Again, I'm not an attorney, but apparently our city attorney has given advice to Inga that she needs to follow. And so again, I don't think we can really debate it here. And again, under the Brown Act, we can't really debate it. But perhaps Inga could ask for a little further explanation from the city attorney.
Right, and I should say that it's not just the library. I mean, the decision was made by the city manager with the assistant city manager over a weekend with the city attorney working on it to see where we had to come down on this, given all the different factors, and then that was what they rolled out. But yeah.
Okay.
For more information.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. And we're not debating anything or coming up with a motion or a group opinion here. The difference is what you have to do and what you can still choose to do. And if I understood what you just said, the city manager decided that it's going to be one way for all city offices.
Correct.
So see, that's where I would put the question. Why is the city choosing to do that when they don't have to?
Okay, so perhaps Inga can get a little more clarity about that from city manager and or city attorney. I think there's at least one more director verbal report related to MC Gives, and I see Mary Jane here, so we appreciate her being here. Did you want to introduce that item, Inga?
Sure. So today is the day that MC Gibbs celebrates the wonderful job that everybody did raising funds. But because it wasn't an in-person event, it wasn't, as it has been in previous years, the opportunity to actually pick up the check. So the check is being mailed to us and we don't know the exact dollar amount. Is that right, Mary Jane?
I texted you, but you've been giving a lot of reports.
Okay.
Because after the meeting, we
Oh
got
my
it.
gosh.
We got an email from Brian. Shall I go ahead and share?
Yes, I'm looking at it. Wow.
So our goal this year was $55,000, and we'd raised from individuals and from challenge gift donors $59,000 and $59,427. But because the matching funds that were significantly greater than last year, I think it's 18% more money for all organizations, we'll be getting a total of $66,350.50. So it's a 31% increase, that grand total over last year.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
MC Gives did very well across the board. Interestingly, these grand totals per organization were up. My gut sense is that ours was up about as much as MC Gives as a whole. But also interestingly, the number of donors stayed sort of flat this year and last year. And the same thing was true for us. So the dollars went up, but not the number of donors. And if I could just share one more thing from today's meeting, they have a few special awards that they give, usually $1,000 each for the organization that has the most younger donors and the organization that has the most donors. And this year they did something special. They set aside $12,000, which they are giving out to 12 different organizations targeted to supporting kids and teens' mental health in the arts. So I couldn't write them down quickly enough, and none of them were terribly familiar to me. Many of them are small, but it sort of loops back to the earlier conversation that the trustees were having about the need for a teen librarian and a children's librarian. There, Dan Baldwin and Bradley Zeev talked at some length about their concerns for kids in the community.
And that was the whole theme of our big idea this year was social and emotional skills, helping support the social emotional skills for kids, because being a year and more outside of school, they haven't developed their social and emotional skills the way they would have, and we need to help kids and also support parents.
Very good. Well, congratulations to everyone involved in the MC Gives campaign, including our own staff and the Friends and Foundation, and of course MC Gives itself. That's outstanding.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Very good. Any other director verbal reports?
And nothing that can top that one.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Okay.
But don't forget chocolate and wine tomorrow. Saturday.
I think we don't want to steal Harish's report, right? Because he's the liaison.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, we'll wait for more on that then under trustee comments. So let's start trustee comments with Mr. Joshi.
Well, pleased to see how everything's running well. I've said that before, and I drop into the library from time to time just to look around, and I'm always impressed by everything running smoothly. So I'm very happy about that.
And then chocolate and wine is this Saturday?
Yes, well, do you want me to tell you about the RLS Club donation then? Is that the one?
Well, I think maybe how people can participate still if they, unless it's too late to get a ticket at this point.
And Mary Jane could do that for you if you'd like.
Okay, yeah, please.
I just glanced at the board, the secure board area, and there are 6 party bags of 150 left. 2 of them are bags with wine that are $100 each, and 4 of them are wonderful bags that are non-alcoholic, but include elderberry syrup and fizzy water and are really quite lovely. And some special items in the are stuffed inside, and some wonderful new volunteers were helping today in the community room under Diane's guidance. Lots of tissue paper down there.
Very good. Okay, any additional comments, Harish?
Yes, in regard to what you say, yesterday I was at the library and I saw them wheeling out a case of wine. So things are moving, and I'm glad everybody who's going to be joining is going to enjoy it.
Very good. Very good. Okay, any other comments on a different subject, Harish, or is that your comments?
No, that is my comment. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Trustee Petty.
Oh, and I'll just remind people, if you're baking cookies, to bring to Chocolate and Wine tomorrow afternoon's the drop-off period for those, so that the Friends volunteers can get them all in the bags and everything. And I'm just real pleased with the discussions we've had today and the movement of indicating progress in, a handful of directions. So it's nothing but good stuff today. So thank you to my fellow trustees and the staff.
Very good. I certainly agree with those comments. Trustee Mora.
Thanks for a good meeting. That's it.
Okay, very good. And Vice Chair Felguth. Jennifer, do you have any comments today, or are you frozen?
She's muted, even if she is talking.
Yeah, you're muted if you're talking. I think you may be frozen. Inga, do you happen to know?
Sorry, I just got booted off the internet for about the 8th time during this meeting.
Oh, no.
Are you still with us?
Just got booted off again, I think.
Just got booted off again, I think. Inga, do you happen to know if she has comments for today?
I just keep getting booted out and brought back in.
Do you have any comments for today?
Oops. So I haven't heard that she had any comments. She might be interested if down the road we get a grant for hotspots. A lot of libraries lend out hotspots, and I can see that that might be a good thing to look into one of these days.
Oh, there she is. So before we lose you, do you have any comments for today's meeting?
No, just apologies for constantly getting booted out and coming back in. Glad to see the statistics showing people are coming back to the library using our services, and I'm excited about the future. And congratulations, Inga, on your impending retirement. I know you're going to look forward to that. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good. And as chair, I just wanted to echo Bob's comments earlier that I thought we got a lot done at this meeting, and we're making a lot of progress, and appreciate the work of all the trustees and all the staff and all the volunteers and all of our customers as well. So with that, we'll adjourn today's meeting to the special meeting of the Board of Library Trustees scheduled for March 10. Thank you very much and have a good evening.